Hi everybody, welcome and thank you for joining me again. Today we are going to get straight into today's discussion. Now, I watched a segment of Sky News Australia and they were talking about Charles and his love of Islam, etc., etc. And it triggered something which I have not thought about in a very long time. And I don't think I ever spoke about it on YouTube. But I think there's no better time than right now. So, for decades, Charles's public persona has been shaped by a blend of supposed eccentricity, becoming a sort of media caricature of a benign, slightly eccentric, tea-drinking environmentalist who paints whimsical watercolors and talks to plants. It is this view of Charles which often leads people to praise him for his soft power and his emotional openness, but others called him weak, a weak man who shies away from conflict, blah, blah, blah. Nothing, absolutely nothing could be further from the truth. Charles is not a weak man. He is very, very far from being soft-spoken and passive. Firstly, he has a notorious temper and is petulant to the extreme. The leaky pen incident was not the first or the only public display of temper and irritation. We just don't see all of it as it is usually cut out from any footage. But then the public displays of temper pales in significance when it comes to what he is capable of behind closed doors. A little thing like microphone setups have set him off into a spin in public. But anything or anybody who does not adhere to his standards can eventually vouch for his fiery temper. In The Rebel King, you can read of many of the tantrums Charles threw as a fully grown adult. For instance, throwing Diana's ring at an aide, kicking the furniture in a closed room for 15 minutes while Diana stood crying in the hallway. And remember the gardeners who can't sue him or, take him to Labour Court or anything like that, but who, as an alternative, let it leak that when one of the younger fellows could not name a plant, Charles asked for him to be removed and to never appear in front of him again. Charles is an extremely stubborn man. Charles is the kind of stubborn you and I will never understand, because his stubbornness is also fueled by the fact that he knows and has known, even as a child, that he can do basically anything and get away with anything. He has spent decades stubbornly pushing his personal agendas, whether on architecture, on organic farming, climate policy, and alternative medicine. He can be relentless and even aggressive when it comes to his opinion or his pet projects. Remember when he said this at the COP26 in Glasgow? He called climate change and loss of biodiversity a major global crisis and said, I quote, "Climate change and biodiversity loss pose an even greater existential threat to the extent that we have to put ourselves on what might be called a warlike footing." And then he followed it up with, here we need a vast military-style campaign to marshal the strength of the global private sector with trillions at its disposal. By using military rhetoric and metaphors, Charles was indeed trying to push politicians to bypass normal partisan delays and treat climate change as a defense and security priority. Why? Because he, Charles, said so. Now remember Charles and Professor Edzard Ernst? When Professor Ernst denounced the Smallwood Report, a report commissioned by Charles which claimed that integrating alternative medicine into the NHS would save money. Well, when Professor Edzard Ernst denounced that report, Charles had his private secretary file an official complaint against Professor Ernst at the Exeter University, which then resulted in Exeter freezing Ernst's research grant and forcing him into early retirement. When faced with criticism, Charles does not back down like a weak man. He doubles down like a petulant one. Charles has absolutely no qualms in making cold, hard decisions. None. But of course, when it suits or benefits him. You see, my friends, this eccentric old fool persona serves a clear institutional purpose. It protects him and disarms any attack against him. For example, remember Charles's spider letters, memos written to government ministers advocating for certain causes? So instead of everyone making a stink about his political interference, it was reframed as whimsical passion projects. Also remember, a monarch surrounded by immense wealth, vast estates and immense clout is difficult for the public to relate to. I mean, who relates to crowns and ermine cloaks and golden carriages these days? Just about nobody. But take a man who paints whimsical watercolor landscapes and talks to hedgerows, and everybody and their grandmother finds him quaint, harmless, and very British. Correct? Do you guys agree? It deflects away from the complex financial structures of Charles Windsor and the monarchy, the patronage networks, which is something I would like to talk to you about at some point, and all the political influence he wields. I mean, it is so much easier to poke fun at his organic gardens than to dissect the institutional power he wields. And make no mistake, Charles can be a very cruel man, heartless even. Remember Charles and Diana's official engagement interview when asked whether they were in love, and Diana said, "Of course," and Charles added, "whatever in love means." Now, I truly do not care how sycophants try to frame it. It was a cold, dismissive statement with no care for Diana or her feelings. Same when it came to Harry's birth. His immediate reaction was, "Oh God, it's a boy," followed by a comment about his red hair, after which he took off to go play polo. And remember the tour in South Korea when he said, "I've come to the conclusion that it really would be far easier to have two wives to cover both sides of the street." Again, sycophants and minders try to spin it as light-hearted banter, but in reality it was hurtful to Diana, and it clearly came from a place of intense jealousy and resentment. Charles often used what sycophants like to term aristocratic irony and humor as a shield, when in reality it is deliberate emotional cruelty. And just as a side note, don't think for 1 minute that Camilla hasn't had a taste of that emotional cruelty. I promise you it will come out one day. Someone will write a book about it, maybe after Charles's death, I don't know. But Camilla has indeed tasted some of that emotional cruelty and had quite a bit of it, I promise you. Anyway, Charles is in fact so rigid and self-absorbed that he has no room left for empathy, not even to those closest to him. The Queen, in a way, maybe because she was so busy, brushed over many things when Charles was younger. But Prince Philip didn't. As hardened as a man he was, Prince Philip had immense empathy for Diana. Well, at least up to a point. Prince Philip spoke to Charles a number of times regarding the way he treated Diana and about other behaviors. Charles is not a weak man. He is not weak in terms of Harry and Meghan either. He is doing exactly what he wants to do. Harry and Meghan is also a very convenient distraction from his own behavior and failings. And I believe he's also using them from time to time to say and perhaps do things which he can't do because of being the king. Okay? Charles is not weak. He is selfish, petulant, stubborn, cold, and his first priority is himself. Not the monarchy, not his family, not even his wife. It is all about him. The sly, gaslighting, manipulative king. Okay, guys and girls, short one for now. I may be back later today or early tomorrow morning. Until then, please take good care of yourselves, stay vigilant, and stay safe. Bye.